Hey everyone, and welcome to a new video. And in this video, as you can tell from the title, I'm going to tell you all about the palettes that I didn't buy and also the palettes that I'm not going to buy that have just, recently released, because it is palette season. Woohoo! It is the holiday season, so all these brands are coming out with new palettes, and I don't know about you, but I'm feeling kind of overwhelmed by it all. Even though I'm an eyeshadow palette junkie, I love my eyeshadow palettes. I did an eyeshadow palette collection about a year ago, which I will link for you in the I button up here. And even though I have a lot of palettes, it may probably seem like I just buy every single palette under the sun, and that's definitely not the case. So I've gone through a lot of eyeshadow palette collections recently, and I'm like, I don't have that palette, and then I realized, oh yeah, but that's why I decided not to buy it. So I thought I would sort of do an anti-haul kind of video where I talk about recent and not so recent limited edition palettes that I was able to get my hands on, that I knew I could buy, but that I very consciously made the decision not to get. So I do pick and choose which palettes I want to get. For this holiday season, something that I did choose to get is this, and this is also mostly what I'm wearing on my eyes. I don't really have the means right now to put any pictures in with editing because my computer is being a little bit crazy. So what I've done is that I've actually downloaded a bunch of palette pictures onto my tablet, and I hope that I can show you a little bit what I want to talk about through this means. So apologies if I can't really put like a picture of the palette on my screen because my video editing software and my computer at this moment do not go together. I need a new laptop very badly, but I have to up and all that. So the first palette that I'm going to talk to you about, which I never got, is this, and this is the Urban Decay Electric palette. This is the Urban Decay Electric palette, and a lot of people love this palette because of the colorful scheme that it has. But to me, when I saw this, and I also saw this in person, it just has a lot of colors that I don't really know how to work into a look. And I'm not sure if you can see this on screen, but if you look at pictures of this, there are two blues in there that are very identical, especially when you swatch them. So I was like, yeah, I want to get a colorful eyeshadow palette, but I need a little bit more variation than this, which is why I ultimately decided to buy that full spectrum palette when it came out and actually never bought this. It does have great pigmentation and the quality of these shadows is incredible. I do have to say, I totally agree with people on that, but it just isn't the kind of palette that I personally want to go for. Now, another older limited edition palette that I decided not to get is the Gwen Stefani Urban Decay palette. This is a gorgeous eyeshadow palette, but the main gripe I have with this is that there are 8 shades right here in the top, and they all look identical to me. I have so many neutrals, and this is a very neutral palette as well. So I was like, what is this palette going to bring me that I don't already own? So many shades in here that are actually identical, and then you have these weird pops of color at the bottom that, to be quite honest, I just don't know what to do with a shimmery blue. So, I mean, not in this color scheme. So I feel that even though the packaging of this was absolutely stunning, I just never decided to get it because I was like, why? Why? Another palette that I do not own is the Urban Decay Moondust palette, which I think was released 2 years ago, I think over the summertime, and this has 8 of their Moondust formula shadows. This is super shimmery, and I thought that these looked absolutely stunning when I swatched them. The only shade, however, that I thought was unique enough to get this palette was Light Sheer, which is a very pretty shimmery green shade. And to be quite honest, to buy a palette like this for just one shade, even though the packaging is gorgeous, I just didn't think it was worth it. And then last year for Christmas, and I think they still do this, I actually found this sleek palette. So this is the only palette that I can pretty much show you because this is the only one I actually own. And I was like, hey, that's a great substitute for the Urban Decay Moondust palette. And this is what it looks like. It has 6 shades, and all of them are super shimmery. You get a green, a purple, a bronze, a dark blue, a reddish shade, and a silver. The only thing you don't get that the Urban Decay does is like a dark gray and a pink. So this has 2 shades less, but this is only, I think, 12 euros versus the Moondust, which was like almost 60. So I'm like, that was a much better deal. So I did decide to buy something similar because I do really like the idea of the Moondust palette, but I just couldn't get down with the actual palette, the price point, and the shades that were in there. Now, another palette, if you saw my eyeshadow palette collection, then you know that I'm a collector of the Urban Decay Vice palettes. I have all of the 4 regular ones, but they also released 2 limited edition ones that were even more limited than the limited edition Vice palettes, if that even makes sense. So they did the Vice LTD, like neon yellow packaging. I never was able to get my hands on that. That released, I think, only in the States, and it was very difficult to get your hands on there. So that's something that I couldn't personally get my hands on. But for their 20th anniversary, Urban Decay released the Vice Reloaded palette with tons of shades from like their OG eyeshadow line. And I looked at this and I was like, I like 2 shades in this palette. I like Gash and I like Mildew, but I just didn't see how I would be able to make one coherent look with this palette. So I decided not to get this because I just thought it wasn't going to be worth it to be, you know, investing in a palette, even though it would round off my collection quite nicely, if there are shades in there that I'm not going to wear. Then it's not just Urban Decay palettes that I decided not to get. This was the spring release from Too Faced. I'm not sure if you can see it because of the glare, but this is the Natural Love palette that released this spring. I was in the States this spring and I was able to glance at this at Ulta. And apparently this has a lot of their shades from like their popular 9-pan palettes, like the little tins. Gorgeous, very neutral. Is this something you need? Is this something that if you already own a lot of neutral eyeshadow palettes that you need in your life? I looked at this and I was like, no. And again, like the Urban Decay Gwen Stefani palette that I just told you about, a lot of these shades are very samey. So even though you get a ton of shades in this palette, there's about 2 looks that you can do with this, which I look for a little bit more versatility in my eyeshadow palettes. Now the next Too Faced palette that I never decided to get was the Too Faced Peanut Butter and Jelly palette. This was, of course, a huge hype on YouTube, and so many people raved about this palette. It was super limited edition at first, but then it became permanent at Ulta, so technically you can still buy this. It has the peanut butter shade, and it has a really fun purple called Jelly, which, I mean, it's great, but when I looked at this, I was like, no, how am I going to wear that? Again, this is one look. This is not a very versatile palette, and that's also the main gripe that I've seen a lot of people have with this when they end up decluttering it in their videos. You can get about 1 look with this, and while this purple looks very stunning in the pan, it is a very thin formula and it's not very well pigmented as well. So that one fun pop of color that you do get in here doesn't perform very well. And I was just like, no, I cannot get down with that. Now, another palette that I decided against getting because as of, I think, last year, Sephora US now ships to Europe, to at least certain countries, and they ship to the Netherlands, which means that I could have gotten this Kat Von D Metal Matte palette last year. I actually placed an order right before Christmas. When this was out, it was still available, and I looked at this online and thought, no, I love Kat Von D eyeshadow. I have the Monarch palette, and I love that palette. The formula is absolutely stunning. So, and I also have a couple of the Metal Crush singles, which is another formula, which is in this palette too. And I love those too. They're super shimmery, super bold, very cool colors to play with. But what I hate about this palette is that a couple of the shimmers correspond to the mattes, but not all of them. You get shades that don't really go with anything else that's in the palette, it seems. And I just thought it would be incredibly crazy difficult to work with this, especially because it's like a huge palette as well. It is really stunning, but because of so many mattes compared to only a few shimmers that you get in here, I just didn't think it would be worth the money. Now, another palette that released last year is the Tartiste Pro palette, and at first I put this on my wish list at Sephora. I definitely did at first, but then I saw it in real life, and I mean, these pinks and these purples look absolutely gorgeous, but again, there are just only 4 shimmers and only 1 duochrome, and when you swatch these, the shimmers just aren't that great. I mean, you get 16 mattes, and I just don't need that many mattes in my life. Like, I like a good matte eyeshadow, don't get me wrong, I do. But with this many, I mean, and how many looks can you make with this? Because you have 5 looks, or 4, and that's pretty much it. I don't really feel inspired by this. And I was like, no, I'd be much better off buying a different one. Another Tarte palette that I do not own and that I don't plan on getting, but I do have to say that I may have ordered the new Tartelette Toasted palette, so maybe I need to get this to round off the collection, because I'm a little bit bad like that. But this is the original Tartelette palette. And apart from the row of purples in the middle, this palette does not appeal to me whatsoever. And I remember seeing this in Sephora a couple of years ago when I was in the US on a trip, and I swatched this and I felt so underwhelmed by the quality of it. I felt it was very chalky, it didn't really have great color payoff. Again, a lot of these like colors on this side of the palette are very similar, so you can't really bounce around the palette and like create a look. You definitely get 3 looks and that's all you can do with this. At least that's my impression. I'm pretty sure, you know, a lot of people love this palette, so if that's you, and that goes for any of these palettes, if you own any of the palettes I'm talking about in this video and you love them, good for you. We all have different tastes, and that's why I'm making this video as well. Now another palette that I think might still be available, but I'm not sure how limited this was. This is the Tarte Make Believe in Yourself palette. I'm not sure if you can see it because it's a little shiny here. But this is also a very high shimmer palette, and I'm so glad that I held out for the Urban Decay Heavy Metals palette, because this has a lot of neutrals, a few pops of color, but because of the shimmer in these, when I swatched them, I felt they all look very sort of muted. Because of the shimmer in these, they all look like silver with a hint of color. Whereas the Urban Decay Heavy Metals, I mean, I'm not sure if you can see that teal color on my moving lid, but that's a teal, and it packs a little bit more of a punch. And so while this is a very pretty palette, and if you like a shimmer that is a little bit more muted, I can see why people love this. But it only has the 1 matte, so I don't feel that this is really a palette you can do much with it. I think that this palette would have appealed to me a lot more if that matte also would have been a shimmer, because then I actually will feel enticed, like I am with the Heavy Metals, to pull in one of my matte palettes and create a look that way. Oh well. Those were the 10 palettes that I was able to get my hands on, that I was able to swatch and, you know, look into, and that I ended up not deciding not to buy. I also have selected 5 palettes that are out right now that I think you can still get, or that are about to be released, that I know I will not be purchasing because they don't appeal to me, or there are other issues with that palette. Now, the first one is the Kat Von D Saint and Sinner palette. That's without, because I just look at these shades and go like, what am I supposed to do with this? I'm sure if you're a makeup artist and you do all these crazy, fun, colorful looks like the one I'm wearing today, go ahead, purchase this, because it is an absolutely stunning palette. But for me, for an everyday kind of gal, this just isn't the kind of palette that I need. I like a fun makeup look once in a while, but I tend to wear more neutral looks, especially to work. I'm not sure if my students would appreciate it if I show up with pink eyeshadow. So that's why this palette is a no-go. Now, Too Faced does really cool holiday collections every year, I find, but this year I just feel, not again. This is the like Big Planner palette, I think it's called, or Little Planner. They have these like date planner style palettes out for holiday 2017 right now, and I look at this and it looks like every single holiday palette they've done since 2012. I'm not kidding you. Maybe not that long, but the past couple of years, Too Faced have always done a palette with like a pop of green, a pop of purple, a pop of blue, and then a bunch of neutrals. And the quality varies of these every single year. You also get a couple of cheek products right here at the bottom, but I'm looking at this and I'm like, really? So when I saw this, I felt like, oh, that looks like every other holiday palette that they've been putting out in the past couple of years, so definitely a pass for me. Now, a palette that I don't know when this will release, but Urban Decay has just launched the information regarding their new Troublemaker palette. This is all over their Instagram right now, and I think I found this picture on like Allure or something. And it has 9 shades, and it has that like retro Urban Decay style like pan where there's like a split pan somewhere, and that's just the one reason why I'm not going to get this eyeshadow palette, because I hate split pans because they're just so small, and trying to get a brush in there, it's just a nightmare. It does have some really cool warm tones in here, but I feel that this is the type of palette that we've seen so many brands do this past year, and it's just not adding anything new to Urban Decay's line. It does have a really nice red called Relish, and I'm really hoping that they're going to sell it in a single if they don't already do that, because that would be a gorgeous color to own. But the other shades in there are just a bit meh to me. Then we only have 2 more palettes left. I need to mention this. This is the Anastasia Subculture palette. For a girl with brown eyes like myself, these colors totally appealed to me, and then the reviews came out, and I'm just scared. I'd love to try it for myself. That's the only reason why I'd purchase it, just to see whether I could make it work for me. But I've heard so many people with average makeup skills like myself just completely not being able to work with this, and I'm like, it's just not worth it. I do really like the look of Axis, Edge, Untamed, Destiny, and Roxy. I would totally rock those shades, but the quality of this, and you know, it being so pigmented and so difficult to blend, I just can't deal with that. Now, the last palette that I wanted to show you is the new Faced Clover palette, and I believe this is about to launch, or it has just launched at Sephora and the Too Faced website. If you don't know what this is, the concept behind it is like, I think they also donate money to like animal welfare, like charities or something like that. And Clover is the name of Jared Blandino's dog. So this is an eyeshadow palette that is inspired by Too Faced founder's dog. Now, when I already read that, I was like, why? Why would you make an eyeshadow palette that is inspired by your dog? I just don't get it. The shades look lovely here, but I do have to say that every picture I see of this palette online, it looks completely different. Here they look really nicely rich and pigmented, but on so many pictures that I've also seen, these look very like flat and muted and a little bit chalky, to be quite honest. It looks a lot more pastel in some pictures that I've seen. The packaging is super cute though. I'm not sure if you can see that. It's got a little dog and like all these like little animals on there. So it is really, really great. And I love that they do donate money with every single purchase of this palette to charity. That is definitely great. But I'm not interested in this eyeshadow palette whatsoever. I wish they would donate like 50 cents or $1 for every Too Faced palette that is sold to an animal charity, and then I would be completely down with it. But just this one limited edition release, I'm like, meh. So yeah, those were the 15 palettes that I would like to mention in this video. Please leave a comment down below with your palettes that you are going to be buying or that you decided not to get. And yeah, please, if you like this video, I would love it if you thumbed it up, and come back next week because I make new videos every single Sunday. I hope to see you in my next video.